He just looked like the typical guy next door. Clean cut, friendly, always looking to help. But Bruce Everett Lindahl, he was not at all who he seemed to be. Because behind that smile was an evil predator who hunted women across Illinois for years, and no one connected the dots. He slipped through the hands of police, left bodies behind him, and died before anybody knew the truth. But when his DNA was finally tested, decades later, what they would uncover would expose one of the most notorious hidden killers in American history. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you are new here. I hope you're all doing so well. Welcome back to another true crime and makeup episode. Oh yeah. As you can probably see from the thumbnail, the title and the intro I just gave you, today we are covering the horrific case of Bruce Everett Lindahl. Why does the guy have an uncanny valley smile? He's like the Mona Lisa. I feel like if I walk across the room, his eyes are going to follow me. But before we dive in today, if you are new here, my name is Anna. I am a certified yapper. And one day I decided I'm going to hop on YouTube. I'm going to yap about true crime. And now I find myself doing it twice a week, every single week on a Wednesday and Sunday. So if true crime is your jam, I highly suggest you subscribe. Get the notification bell on because, well, like I said, I'm here for you twice a week, every single week, and it's free. Please don't forget to engage with this video in some way, leaving a like, leaving a comment, sharing, if you feel obliged, would be incredible. But also, if you could hype the video, I would be so grateful. I really need your hype points. YouTube keeps telling me it's very important. So I need them. Any details you need regarding me, myself and I, product details, social media handles, everything, it's all listed down below. But I think that's it. So without any further rambling and any further ado, let's get into the horrifying case of Bruce Everett Lindahl. So before I get into this horrific case, I just need to ask, does anyone else see what I see when it comes to this weirdo? He gives uncanny valley type of vibes. Like the photo that I'm looking at right now, uncanny valley. It genuinely looks as though the guy's got a coat hanger in his mouth, keeping his smile so wide. He's smiling and his eyes look crazy, but they're no smiling eyes. They're just crazy eyes. Anywho, Bruce Everett Lindahl, he was born on January the 29th of 1953, and he was born in St. Charles of Illinois. Now, he was the oldest of 4 children. They were born to Arlene and Jerome Lindahl. That was smooth. That was like a one-take wonder, that whole segment. Okay. Honestly, usually when it comes to names and dates, I'm like, obviously it all gets cut out and it's just me speaking somewhat seamlessly with a few mispronunciations. But that was good. That was smooth. Now, devastatingly, the Lindahl children, to be quite honest, none of them would have it easy. In fact, they knew a dysfunctional family at best. The household was just filled with complete instability, and all they really had was each other. Arlene and Jerome, they were a couple who were very fond of an alcoholic beverage, or 20. But let's just say the alcoholic beverages wasn't fond of them. It just didn't agree with them, and alcohol was something that they were consuming so often, and it would just turn them both into these verbally abusive, aggressive, physically aggressive people. And that's just not the kind of environment that's safe and nurturing and warm to children. Now, I will say, props somewhat to Arlene and Jerome. The anger and the abusiveness that they had, it was never directed at their children, just each other. But that doesn't make it any easier to witness. And you hear this with people. They'll say, well, yeah, I'm aggressive when I'm drunk, but I don't hurt my children. You are hurting your children by displaying that behaviour in front of them having to watch you abuse verbally and physically each other. That messes with children. I will say, despite Jerome's heavy drinking problem, he was able to hold down a stable job and bring in somewhat of a stable income to the household. Arlene, on the other hand, she was a stay-at-home mum. She was a homemaker. But I mean, are you really a homemaker if all you bring into your home is violence, aggressiveness, alcohol-filled rage? Doesn't really scream homemaker to me. And it is very safe to say that the Lindahl children, life at home was awful. It really was. And they were all affected by this, but it did seem as though Bruce Lindahl, he would be most affected by it. He felt as though he was this older sibling. He was the older brother. It's his duty as the older brother to protect his siblings. But how could he do that? How could he handle that pressure when he was also struggling? He was also struggling with what they were witnessing on an almost daily basis. Life at home, it drove Bruce outside. He didn't want to be indoors around his mother and father wondering who's going to walk in a room in an angry mood, who's going to lash out first. And he actually sought solace on the streets, spending most of his time outside doing whatever he could to avoid going home. And despite his home life being a complete and utter show, I have to admit, Bruce, he did well in school. He was deemed to be very intelligent, but he was also described as being socially odd. And it wasn't that he was a loner by any means. In fact, he had quite a lot of friends. It was just that in these friendship groups, he was very, very controlling from a very young age. He wanted to direct the narrative. If they're playing games, Bruce wants to decide which one. They're going out after school, Bruce is going to decide where. But he would go on to graduate from Downers Grove North High School in 1971. He had then went on to pursue higher education. Now, I will say some sources state that he actually got a degree in electromechanics, whereas others say that he studied it but never achieved the degree. I wasn't there, I'm not too sure. But let's just say that by the mid-1970s, he was able to work in the area of electromechanics, so somewhere along the line, he's done all right for himself. Or he's very good at lying his way into a good situation. So after his graduation, if there was one, if not, after his time studying, he would go on to work as an electrician for a bit of time. He was also studying at the Mid-Valley Vocational Centre in Caneville, Illinois. And not only was he smart, he seemed to be a guy that was quite well liked. He was described as being charismatic. He was also very sociable, which we only see in a few. I'm thinking like Ted Bundy, Gacy, that bracket of monster. Known to be sociable, well liked and charismatic, it's not something you see too often. Bruce was also a very active person. He really liked physical activity. He was very much into racquetball. He also enjoyed parachuting. I mean, that's kind of an out there hobby, but hey. And he also enjoyed going bowling. So again, there's activities in there that can be very sociable. I mean, bowling especially. Can you bowl by yourself? Maybe, but usually you're with someone. Many of his friends at this point, they describe him as being very cheerful and also someone who has a really strong sympathetic side. You're not feeling great, Bruce will ask you about it. You want to talk about your problems? Bruce will listen. He was also someone described as always laughing and joking about something, but many said that he was someone who could be very quick to anger. Apparently, he had this darker side, this side that was known to become extremely rude, extremely aggressive, especially when intoxicated. And let's be honest, that comes as no shock knowing what we know about his parents, and it could be possible that alcoholism runs in the family. Then in 1976, Bruce would be arrested for possession of marijuana. Now, at the time of his arrest, he was described as not seeming intoxicated, which apparently is a running theme with this guy. Like, he could drink and drink and drink, and although he is drunk, he doesn't seem intoxicated to speak to him. Whereas me, I sniff a glass of wine and I'm like talking like that. I can be sloppy drunk. I mean, that's an over-exaggeration. I'm not like a sloppy drunk, but I could certainly get there, you know? I'm a little lady. It happens easily. And the possession of marijuana, that wasn't just a little one-off. This wasn't something that Bruce was caught doing once and would never do again. He was known to always have marijuana. He was always known to always have alcohol. And apparently this was his way of impressing the ladies. He'd be like, hey babe, you want to smoke a blunt? You want to light up that devil's lettuce? You want to smoke a little doobie out back? And it did seem after this arrest for possession of marijuana that, why am I saying marijuana weird? Why does it sound so marijuana? It's the accent. From this moment onward, he seemed to spiral into the world of petty crime and minor legal troubles. And the legal troubles he usually found himself in would usually be to do with a bar fight. You know, Bruce gets intoxicated and suddenly he's Billy Big Balls. He thinks he can fight everyone in the room, which must be so annoying when you're just trying to have a good time. You're just sitting enjoying your beer and then you've got bloody Bruce Big Balls in a corner, like shadow boxing at your head. Bruce, sit down, please. Have a glass of water, eat some bread, and then go home. And the annoying thing with this guy is he seemed to be someone who had connections in high places. He had friends within the police, and he never really seemed to face any proper punishment, or at least nothing that would deter him away from his life of crime. Most of the time, whenever he would get in trouble, he would just be hit with administrative fines, even though there was witnesses who tell the police, that guy there, Bruce, he was the main aggressor. But they just don't hear it. There's a $50 fine, Bruce, pay it when you can. Or, rip it up and put it in the bin. We won't tell anyone. Now, many people would describe later on how Bruce, at one point, it was like he just changed completely. What was once a dark side seemed to be all his sides. He became manipulative. He was unsettling to be around. He would often make really dark, threatening jokes and then try and pass it off as dark humour or dry humour. So by 1978, Bruce decides, you know what? I need a little change of scenery. So I'm going to move. I'm going to relocate to Aurora, Illinois. And when he moves there, he's continuing his work as an electrician, getting to know the neighbours. He's becoming deeply involved in the community. And I'm telling you, it's starting to stink like John Wayne Gacy up in here. People who knew Bruce at a distance, 100 feet away, they said that he seemed very normal, living a very regular life. He was always offering help if you needed it, but if you got just a little bit closer, if you maybe befriended Bruce and he let you in, or if you lived right next door to him, you would see that dark side that everyone else knew so well. You'd see the short temper, the propensity for violence, the very traits that he would use in his crimes. So as time goes on, Bruce, he starts to become a bit erratic. He becomes more cruel and more predatory in his behaviour. And this facade that he was able to create with neighbours, with associates, that would soon start to crack. And when those cracks started to develop, they only got worse. You couldn't polyfiller these cracks if your life depended on it. They ran too deep. They ran too far. Don't waste your time. Now, devastatingly, over the next few years, young women from the different suburbs of Chicago, they would start to vanish. And when they were found, they would be found strangled, raped, or sometimes they would be found dumped in rivers. All the while, this pathetic, weaselly loser continues to live this double life. He went to work, he went to parties, he laughed and he joked. All the while, hiding the fact that he was one of Illinois' most prolific serial killers and predators. Now, we are going to jump back ever so slightly in the timeline to 1976, and this is when the body of 16-year-old Pam Maurer would be found in a horrifying way. Pam Maurer, she was known to be so independent, she was well trusted, she was well liked. She was a kind of girl who was genuinely kind to everyone. And she was a kind of girl that you never really had to worry about. She was very wise, she was worldly aware. She was known by both her family and friends to be someone who was really quiet and so dependable. You needed Pam, she would be there. She was someone who was so deeply loved and so deeply appreciated. Not only this, but Pam was an honours student at Downers Grove High School. She was someone who was known to be very intelligent, and this would be recognised not just by her teachers, but her peers as well. Everyone was a bit jealous of Pam. Any subject you threw at her, she seemed to be able to do it. She seemed to excel in everything that life gave her. On the night of January the 12th of 1976, Pam was away to spend the evening with a friend. Now, her and this friend, they were going to have dinner together, so Pam was going over to her friend's house. Now, it's around 9:45 p.m. Pam leaves her friend's house and she's going to stop off at a 7-Eleven for a bottle of Coke. She tells her family that this is in her plan. She will be home right after, but she wasn't. She would never ever make it home. So then on the morning of January the 13th of 1976, this small town where Pam lived would be absolutely shattered. The Cam they once knew was now gone almost permanently, because lying in a ditch just off of College Road, still dressed in her jeans and her jacket, was the lifeless body of Pam Maurer. Now, whilst Pam's clothes were still on, it was quite clear that they had been disturbed. They looked as though they had been taken off and then forcibly put back on, like possibly Pam hadn't put them on herself. Now, next to her lifeless body was an empty Coca-Cola bottle, an object that we would see every day and it just seems so ordinary, but in this instance, it felt so incredibly sinister. When Pam's body was taken in for her autopsy, everyone's worst fears would be confirmed. 16-year-old Pam had faced a brutal sexual assault. She had been raped before then being strangled to death. And the whole community, they were just in this uproar. How could this happen in their small town? They don't know violence like this. They don't know how to deal with violence like this. And in 1976, in suburban Illinois, the police don't even know how to deal with this. Now, the police, they do try. They launch this full-scale investigation. They are determined to find out what happened to this young girl, who did this to her and why. But very quickly, they realise this is going to be far more difficult than they could ever have anticipated. There's no witnesses, no fingerprints, and no usable forensic tools sitting at their disposal. Now, every single boy that had known Pam or come into contact with Pam, they would be brought in for questioning. The police, they were trying. God, even every local creep who looked at young girls the wrong way, they would be brought in, they would be interrogated, but still nothing. And at no point in Pam's case did anyone think, you know, that Bruce Lindahl, he's a bit weird. You know, that electrician who's always hanging around outside high schools, who's always trying to go to high school parties, who's always trying to entice teenage girls with drink and weed. He's a bit weird. And not just that, but Bruce would try and offer alcohol and weed to children half his age. He's 22 at this point, half his age, and I'm not good at math, but I'm getting the number 11. 11. A child. And as you can imagine, Pam's murder, this left the entire community shook and terrified. Anyone with young daughters, they weren't letting them out their sight, not even for a minute. If someone's teenage daughter wanted to go to a friend's, they were dropped off and they were picked right back up. The 7-Eleven that used to be an ordinary space was now this freaking symbol of fear, a place where innocence had just ended overnight. And for decades, no one realised that the man who did this to Pam, he was still out there. He was living amongst them and he was becoming bolder with time. So now it's 3 years later and Bruce Lindahl, he's building himself quite the reputation. He's known to be this charming man who is charismatic and magnetic. The guy who has connections everywhere and in everything. And the one who seemed to have this endless amount of energy whenever he was around people, especially young teenage women. And I wonder why. And at the time, what these people didn't know about this monster who was lurking around them was that behind closed doors, he was escalating, he was planning, he was growing more dangerous by the day, more reckless and more confident to do whatever the hell he wanted. And this is when we come to 20-year-old Annette Lazar. Again, we've got Annette, she's young, she's beautiful, she's independent, she's a bit more rebellious than Pam, but she was just looking to enjoy her life. She never caused trouble, she never caused anyone any harm, she was simply just living her life. Then on March the 6th of 1979, Annette thinks to herself, you know what, I'm in the mood for weed. I'm in the mood to smoke a joint, get some marijuana. And this is when she would come into contact with someone who she didn't even know was a complete monster. Someone that she should fear, someone that she should not trust. And that was Bruce Everett Lindahl. So Bruce tells Annette, listen, I can get you marijuana, I can get you anything you want, that is no problem at all. However, there is a small issue where I keep everything in my apartment. So like if you want stuff, you're going to have to come with. And before anyone starts to say, oh, why would she go with him? Like, why would you go with a stranger? Blah, blah, blah. Let's just take a moment and remember that Bruce Lindahl, he's charming, charismatic, well-liked, well-known. People seem to trust him, and this was no different for Annette. No predator is going to show you their true colours when they want you to willingly come somewhere. So Annette goes with Bruce, heads over to his apartment. But once she gets inside, once that door is closed and locked behind her, she very quickly realises that Bruce, he's not this man he pretended to be. He is a complete, utter monster. Inside the apartment, Bruce Lindahl, he immediately pulls a gun on 20-year-old Lynette. He threatens her. He demands that she strips naked. He then forces himself on her and then continues to rape her at gunpoint. Once this terrifying ordeal is over with, Annette is in survival mode. This horrific thing has happened, but all she can focus on now is how she leaves this apartment with her life intact. So Annette, she decides what she's going to do is she's going to play along with Bruce, tell him what he wants to hear. So she feigns interest in possibly building a relationship, staying in contact. She even gives Bruce her number, telling him, you know, I would love to pursue a relationship with you, just to make him feel comfortable, make him think, oh, I've raped her, but she's seeing it as consensual. This is perfect. Like, she's never going to talk to the police. But despite this, despite the reassurance from Annette, Lindahl still says to Annette, you know, if you leave here and you tell anyone, or if I hear that you've went to the police, I will find you and I will kill you. But Annette promises him, you know, like, Bruce, that's not the case. I like you, I'm interested in you, I've left you my number, I want you to call me. And with that, he seems convinced, he seems more settled. He doesn't seem so nervous anymore. So Annette leaves the apartment, and this young woman, she is so incredibly brave because the first thing she does, she goes to the police. She wasn't going to let this monster away with what he'd just done to her. The police, they're people that she can trust. They're people who are there to protect and look after her. Or at least so she thought. What Annette didn't know at that time, what Bruce hadn't disclosed to her, was that very apartment that she was raped in, it belonged to a man by the name of Dave Torres, a friend of Bruce Lindahl's and a frickin' police officer. Now, the police, they basically feign interest in this case. They go to the apartment to investigate. When they go there, they see that Annette had left her number for Bruce, and they start talking amongst themselves, making up their own story. They believe that Annette was a woman scorned. She had slept with Bruce, and he hadn't called her back. Like a scene out of Friends when Joey sleeps with someone, doesn't call them back, and then they become off. They're trying to paint this like that situation. And this wasn't unusual for women in the 1970s. Women's reports, they were often dismissed, or they were blamed on alcohol or drug use. Police said to Annette, it's very clear to them that this was a consensual matter. You had given him your number, you wanted him to call you, and when he didn't, you wanted revenge. They were treating her like the perpetrator in this crime. They treated her as if she was a criminal, all for reporting what happened to her. And we see it too often, we see it to this very day. Men and women, they come forward with so much bravery, they talk about their abuse, they try to seek help, and then people like this turn their backs on them. So they tell Annette, there's not enough evidence to back your story. We can't be convinced that this actually happened. The case was closed and the report put away in a locked drawer. Instead of this young woman being protected, she felt as though she was guilty, that she should be ashamed, like she should be the one who was going to a trial. Nobody stopped Bruce Lindahl. And in that moment that they had where they could have, they failed. And this very incident, that opens the door to everything that happens next. So then we come to 1980, and the monster that is Bruce Lindahl, he is becoming even more cocky. He's becoming more confident. He's gotten away with everything so far, and this makes him believe that he's superior. But luckily for us, when these idiots get to this stage, when these weirdos feel like they are superior, that is usually when they become sloppy. Now at this point, he is still that electrician that everyone knew, the one who was always smiling and waving away with that big coat hanger smile. And whilst he might have had that reputation and was maintaining that, he was also still maintaining the creepy bar stalker reputation as well. He was still the weirdo who stalked the bars, stalked parking lots, stalked shopping centres, always on the hunt for vulnerable women. And now we have 22-year-old Debra Colliander. She was working as a secretary in Naperville. She was known to be very kind, very caring. She was well liked within her work. She was well liked at school. It just seemed like every aspect of her life she was completely adored. And then on June the 23rd of 1980, Debra, she has been working late. And at this point, she's standing outside a shopping centre. She's in the parking lot. And before she knows it, she has been abducted by Bruce Lindahl. Debra screams, she shouts, she cries out for help, but these pleas, they go completely unheard. There is no one around to hear them, no one to see her be taken, no one to help her. This vile, evil creature, he had taken Debra back to his apartment. He tied her up, he brutally raped her. After this horrific ordeal's over, Lindahl, he decides that he's tired. He wants to go for a nap. And once Debra is certain that he's asleep, that he is sound, she makes the brave choice to try and find her way out of this apartment. She knows that if he can do something so heinous and so vicious, what's stopping him from killing her? Thankfully, Debra is able to make it to the front door. She opens the door and she is able to escape unnoticed by Lindahl. And this young woman, yet again, the bravery that she has is just unmatched. Immediately, she goes to the police, tells them what happened, what he did to her, where he took her, describes him to a T, his facial features, his hair, everything about him. And this time, Bruce Lindahl, he would be arrested and he would be formally charged with abduction and rape. And this angers me to my very core, but this man, this weaselly cretin, he seemed to have money to pay his bail. So he pays his bail. He's out on bond, just patiently awaiting his trial. This terrified Debra. She felt like she wasn't safe. She knew that she wasn't safe. How could this monster that had took away any innocence that she had left, how could he be out to roam the streets at the same time as she is, at the same time as other young women? She becomes a shell of herself. She is terrified on a daily basis. She tells her friends, she tells her family, I could swear I'm being followed. I know that I'm being watched, I can feel it, and I swear to God, I have seen Bruce Lindahl's car lurking around, following me. I've seen it multiple times. I know that I'm not safe. And devastatingly, just days before this trial was set to take place, Debra vanishes. Completely disappears. Her car would be found abandoned in Aurora. Her purse was missing, and Bruce Lindahl, he was still out on bail. Lips sealed, revealing nothing and just playing stupid. And it wouldn't be until 1982 when Debra Colliander's body would be found. Hitchhikers would discover her body buried in a shallow grave in a rural field just outside of Naperville. Her body was decomposing and she was still bound. She was still tied up. And although it feels so obvious to me, and I'm sure to you, that Bruce Lindahl was behind this, no one chases him up on this. There's no witnesses, and there seems to not be anyone who believes that he would be capable of murdering the witness who was going to put him behind bars. So then on January the 28th of 1981, loser Lindahl, he would be convicted for illegally tapping and recording other people's phone calls so he could extort them. While the police were trying to detain him, apparently he aimed a shotgun at the police. But after his arrest, he would only be charged with resisting arrest, illegal possession of a weapon, and assault. But yet again, this weirdo was released on bail. He aimed a shotgun at the frickin' police. Released on bail. What does that tell people? And he would remain free during his preliminary investigation. So then we come to April the 4th of 1981. And he is doing his usual thing. He is cruising around shopping and entertainment districts of Naperville. And whilst doing this, he would meet a young man by the name of Charles Robert Huber Jr. Now, Charles, he was better known as Chuck. He was 18 years old. But the pair of them meet, and immediately they're hitting it off. They're chatting away, they're having a laugh, and Chuck's thinking like, God, we're actually like developing a friendship here. Maybe this is someone I could become friends with long term. Chuck is getting along with Lindahl so well that he even agrees to go and play 10-pin bowling with him. And again, they're doing this, they're laughing, they're joking. It's like this friendship's been going for years. So they finish off the bowling and Lindahl says, you know what, like, I'm not ready to go home, like, I'm having a good time. I'm actually staying at my ex-girlfriend's apartment. Why don't you come back there? We can hang out. And if possible, you can maybe help me with some car troubles that I'm having. And Chuck, being the person that he was, he agrees. He'll go back, he'll hang out with him, and then he'll help look at his car and see if he can fix it for him. When they get back to this apartment, Chuck could never have imagined or never anticipated what was going to happen. The pair, they're chilling there for a bit, everything seems to be okay, and then suddenly, out of nowhere, Bruce Lindahl snaps, turns in an instant. He launches this vicious attack toward Chuck. He jumps on top of him, and then he proceeds to stab him over and over and over again in the chest and in the back, wherever he could get him. But Chuck, he was strong. He was fighting back. He was not going to go down without a fight, without wreaking havoc on this monster. And in a way, Chuck actually succeeds. In the midst of this horrifying chaos, Lindahl, he is still launching this attack. He is stabbing away any part of Chuck that he can get. Chuck's trying to avoid these stab wounds. He's trying to defend himself. He's got his arms up. He's holding Lindahl's hands, trying to control where this knife is going. And he's able to do it so much that Lindahl ends up stabbing himself in the thigh. And not only that, Lindahl severs his femoral artery. And if you're not aware, this is a fatal wound. Lindahl would bleed out, and he would bleed to death on top of Chuck, on top of his victim, who is still clinging on for life. Now, thankfully, neighbours within this apartment complex, they had heard screaming, shouting, thudding, what sounded like punches and yelping. They assume there's a fight going on, but this fight seems very intense and it seems to go on for an awfully long time. And many of them actually call the police to the scene. And when the police arrive at this scene, what they would find inside was complete chaos. Now, when officers arrive at this apartment, they would find the door unlocked. And when they go inside, it was a scene of complete chaos. They find Charles, they can tell that he is still alive. I mean, he's barely alive, but at this point, he's still breathing. But devastatingly, he was too injured to speak. He couldn't tell the police what had happened or explain how Lindahl had launched this horrific attack. And devastatingly, Charles, he would be pronounced dead very shortly after being found. Lindahl himself, he was pronounced dead at the scene. Now, bearing in mind at this point, the police, they have no side of the story. What they've walked into, they believe this has been a mutual brawl, a drunken fight that's escalated and went too far. They hadn't realised that Chuck, he had been the victim of this sadistic, horrific murderer who is guilty of so many crimes before him. So at this point, the police decide, let's look at their criminal backgrounds, let's see what they're involved in. So they have a look through and, for Bruce Lindahl, no looking great. And whilst he had some very questionable, horrific offences on his record, they never sat and thought, yeah, he's a killer. Because there was no previous murder conviction, but let's be honest, the convictions he does have proves that he is a piece of shit. The police decide, because this is where the incident is taking place, they're going to do a search of the apartment. So this is Bruce Lindahl's apartment, remember. So they conduct a search and they would find a stack of photographs. All these photographs appeared to be young women. Most of them seemed to be candids and like they had been taken without any consent. Some of the images would show these women partially nude or shown in vulnerable states and even unconscious. Now, there was also hair samples found, there was personal items that didn't belong to Lindahl. There was also other items and indicators that led police to believe that he could be involved with previous sexual assaults, but again, not thinking he's involved with murder. However, the police, when they're going through these photos, they realise something real quick, and that is that one of the images that they've found actually looks like a 16-year-old girl who had went missing from Downers Grove of Illinois on November the 5th of 1979. This young girl was Debra McCall. She had last been seen leaving her high school that very afternoon, and she never returned home. At this point in time, her disappearance remained unsolved. It was still a cold case. And although the police, they examine this photo and they think, you know what, there's definitely likeness to Debra McCall, because the image was so blurry, because the photo was too low and too poor of quality, they couldn't say for definite this was Debra McCall. And due to the lack of digital forensics back then, there was no way that they could sharpen it up and clarify the image to really see who it was. Now, going back to the crime scene of Chuck and Bruce Lindahl, the official report from the scene would conclude that this was a domestic altercation or possibly a drunken fight that had gotten out of control. And this was because there was no survivor to tell their story. There was no eyewitness testimonies to contradict what the police believed. There was no evidence of robbery, of drugs, of third-party involvement. And the case was closed in a matter of days, and it was ruled as a fatal stabbing. And no one had even realised at that point that one of those men found on that apartment floor, they had left a trail of murder, rape, and terror behind them, all across the Illinois suburbs. So, whilst the police have basically closed the lid on a serial murderer, many cold cases, they remained open and they were still unsolved. We have Pamela Maurer, Debra Coliander, and many unidentified victims of sexual assault who had escaped their attacker or never reported them out of fear. And as we know, police agencies, it's very rare that they actually speak to each other. So in DuPage, Kane and Will counties, they're not communicating. They're not cross-referencing anything. Each jurisdiction is treating each murder as an individual case. And then we come to the early thousands. So we've got Britney Spears, Eminem, Avril Lavigne, Kylie Minogue, Friends is still on every night. Did Ross go into Rachel or Bonnie's room? And then we also come to the time where DNA testing, this becomes standard. In Illinois, they start to digitise evidence from old cold cases, one of which being Pam Maurer's case. Now, the reason for this is because they had biological samples that were still being preserved. So we've got the semen from the scene, as well as the Coca-Cola bottle. And the thing is, whilst that sounds promising to us, we do need to remember that at this point, Bruce Lindahl, he's been long gone, like he's been dead decades and not missed by anyone. And this was long before DNA collection was even a thing. So early CODIS searches, when they're conducted, there's no match because Bruce Lindahl, he was never put into the system in the first place. So years continue to go by, and I mean years and years. Time flies. We come to 2018 and the DuPage County Sheriff's Office, they would launch a new cold case task force, and this would basically re-examine unsolved murder cases from the 1970s and the 1980s. In Pam Maurer's case, yet again, this was top priority. And the reason for this was because her evidence was still intact, it was still viable for DNA extraction. So forensic scientists, they conduct retesting on the preserved DNA samples and they use modern sequencing. When they do this, they're able to successfully build a male DNA profile. But yet again, no hits in CODIS. But this time they are not giving up and they're going to go one step further. And that one step further, genetic genealogy. So detectives, they decide they're going to partner with Paragon Nanolabs. This was a company that specialised in forensic genealogy, and which, by the way, was the same method that was used to capture the Golden State Killer. So we know it works. So the unknown DNA from Pam Maurer's case, this is uploaded. Can we say uploaded? Inserted? I don't know what you would say, but it's put into GED Match, which is this like public ancestry database thing. And genetic genealogists, they start building a family tree of potential relatives to the murderer, and they are tracing back through generations. So they do this for months. Months of analysis is taking place, and they're able to narrow down the suspect pool to one single, very likely candidate, and that was Bruce Everett Lindahl. This was a deceased male from Aurora, Illinois, and the only problem they have now is that this complete POS has been dead 40 years. But these detectives, in this instance, they are determined that they're going to see this through to the end. They are going to get justice for the victims, closure for the families. They're going to do everything they possibly can. And they request to exhume Bruce Lindahl's body. So they put in this request, type it up, put it in bold font, mark it as urgent. The request comes back. Bob's your uncle, Fanny's your aunt. Court order approved. So Brucey Boy's body, this would be exhumed from a local cemetery in Aurora under police supervision in January of 2019 for direct DNA comparisons. So forensic teams, they come in, they extract tooth samples, bone samples, anything they possibly can to compare with the DNA from Pam Maurer's case. So these samples, they get sent off for testing and comparison along with the samples from Pam Maurer. Multiple weeks go by, and they must have felt like the longest weeks of these detectives' lives. But it's worth the wait, because the results come back and it confirms that Bruce Everett Lindahl's DNA is an exact match to the semen that was found on Pam Maurer. They officially have this murderer. And detectives at this point, they're feeling so positive about the entire thing. They don't want to stop there. They want to backtrack their way through this monster's entire life. What if there's more cold cases that could be tied to him? And if there are any other victims, how many is there? So detectives from DuPage and the Illinois State Police, they start working their way back through Bruce Lindahl's life. Where he lived, where he worked, who he knew, who was in his social circles, what girlfriends did he have, and let's look deeper into that criminal record. And they would soon discover that Bruce Lindahl, he was known to have a pattern of violent behaviour and escalating violent aggression. There was multiple reports of this loser assaulting and harassing women over the years, ones that were never taken seriously. They discovered all the bar fights that he had once been in, reckless conduct. They even have character statements that say that he was very charismatic, yet incredibly volatile. Someone who could flip on you without a single warning. Not only this, but he was known to have multiple vehicles. He was always loitering around schools, high school parties, always offering young women a lift home, especially those that looked intoxicated and those that weren't with their friends. He was active in skydiving clubs, which I took a whole deep dive into whilst I was researching this case. And skydiving clubs, if you want a whole video on skydiving clubs, let me know, because it is batshit crazy. He also hung out in bars around Aurora, Downers Grove, Naperville, always approaching young women. Now, not only was Pam Maurer's case directly linked to Bruce Lindahl, so was the case of Debra Colliander. Police believe that Debra's murder was a means to silence her permanently. I mean, no shit, Sherlock. I mean, she even said that she was living in fear, but you didn't care back then. And it was too little too late, but the police, they also acknowledged Annette Lazar, who had been raped by this monster who had went to the police and then was made to feel like a criminal herself. They finally acknowledged the fact that she was one of his victims. Several other women from DuPage and Kane County, they would also be directly linked to Bruce Lindahl. All of them having almost identical encounters with this man. Offered a ride, taken to a secluded area or his apartment, assaulted or almost assaulted, and then threatened into silence. Most of the reports that were made at that time were completely dismissed by the police, but it would be under new investigation that these very reports that were made by women and dismissed by the police, these were the same reports that was helping them build the profile of this serial killer. It showed a serial sexual predator who was very quickly escalating toward murder. Now, the case of Debra McCall, this has also been linked to Bruce Lindahl. This was due to proximity, timeline, and evidence that was found in his home. However, Debra McCall's body has never been found. and therefore testing can't be conducted to fully and definitively link her to Bruce Lindahl. And that's just heartbreaking, thinking that this young woman's body might never be found and she might never get the justice that she deserves. So it was on April 29th of 2020 when the DuPage County State's Attorney, Robert Berlin, he would publicly confirm that there was a DNA match between Bruce Lindahl and the murder of Pam Maurer, meaning that Bruce Lindahl, he was the murderer of this young girl. He'd also stated at the time that Bruce Lindahl, he was a prime suspect in the murder of Debra Colliander, and not only that, but multiple assaults throughout the 1970s and the early 1980s. Robert Berlin had also stated, if Bruce Lindahl had not accidentally killed himself in 1981, there is no doubt in my mind that he would have gone on to kill again. Abso-friggin-lutely. Now, there is a case that we haven't mentioned yet, and that is a case of Kathy Halley. Her body would be discovered on April the 24th of 1979 in the Fox River near North Aurora. At the time her body had been found, she had been missing for over a month, and it wouldn't be until October of 2024 that police had been able to use new DNA techniques, and they were able to conclusively link Bruce Lindahl to the murder of Kathy Halley. He was her killer. Now, the FBI and Illinois State Police, they still continue to this very day to review dozens upon dozens of sexual assaults and murders of young women throughout the suburbs of Illinois, looking for potential links to Bruce Lindahl. It is clear to the police that Bruce Everett Lindahl, he had been raping and murdering young women long before he was discovered due to the sheer amount of Polaroid photos they found in his apartment. And we can only hope and pray that it is only a matter of time before more victims will finally get their justice and that their family will get the closure that they need. As always, I do want to end this episode by memorialising and remembering the victims. At the end of the day, they are the ones in these cases who actually matter, the ones that we actually care about, and the ones who actually deserve our attention. And I am sending thoughts, love and prayer to the victims and the victims' families. But my loves, that is it for another true crime and makeup episode. I really hope this one was interesting. Maybe, possibly, it might have been a new case for some of you. Let me know in the comments down below. If you have stayed this long, let's do like a red heart and a blue heart. Do you get blue hearts? If not, leave me like a red heart and the sunglasses emoji, the wee cool guy in the sunglasses. I don't know. Before you leave today's video, please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Get the notification bell on already if you haven't already. Please also don't forget to hype up this video. I need your hype points. I'm begging you for hype points. YouTube says it's important. It's important to me. Pushes me out to the algorithm, which is exactly what I need. Any details you need regarding me, myself and I, they will all be listed in the description down below alongside my social media handles, and any products that I've used on my face today, they'll also be linked below. Don't forget to leave your case suggestions in the comments. I do go through all of the comments. Any case suggestions I see, they're added to my huge ass document and I do gradually work my way through them. But I think that's it for today. Please, please, please remember, be a good person. Do not be a bad person. Stay safe. Look after each other. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.